to Egypt, where those climate talks are underway. And with me is Richie Merzian. He's the Climate and Energy Program Director at the Australia Institute. Richie, we're seeing this energy price shock around the world, largely due to the war in Ukraine, but it does put pressure on energy prices right around the globe, including here. Are you concerned that this will affect ambition at this COP, these climate talks, given those other bread and butter issues are quite difficult to manage for governments right now?
It's a reasonable concern and one that many have had. Basically, will there be backsliding from the high politics of Glasgow last year, given the energy crisis and the war and the increasing tensions between China and the US, two largest emitters? And it's good to say that the leaders that have come from Europe, from across Africa, from across Asia Pacific, have said that the long-term commitment to phase out fossil fuels, to see through these net zero commitments remains. And that everyone is taking confidence in that ultimately there might be bumps on the road where people have had to use additional fossil fuels, if countries have had to shift their short-term energy mixes, but ultimately the message is that those long-term commitments remain in place and that fossil fuels are not part of our collective future. And you had the UN Secretary General say as much yesterday.
Richie Merzian, central to these talks will be the focus on loss and damage. To break it into a couple of easy areas to understand, it's been about reducing emissions, about adaptation, and then now this focus, the first time, I believe, at a COP where loss and damage has been front and centre. What's the timeline here for when developing nations are hoping that rich nations will stump up to help them deal with climate change?
This has been a key priority of the African COP here in Egypt and from the Egyptian presidency. And that's how do you help countries facing these climate impacts deal with the loss and damage that's ultimately being caused, and should industrialized countries like Australia contribute financially to a fund that helps do that. This has been an ongoing issue and climate damage has been increasing. And certainly in Pakistan, and you had Pakistan's Prime Minister here talking to the damage they've had this year. I think it's a very hard topic to land. I think they'll struggle to come up with a political solution here. There might be a bit of a plan for how to take this forward, but ultimately it's a reminder to all countries that we haven't done enough to reduce emissions. We haven't done enough to transition fossil fuels. We're still opening up new fossil fuel projects. And so ultimately more actions required.
Richie Merzian, Director of Climate and Energy at the Australia Institute, live from Sharm el Sheikh. We'll stay in touch over the next couple of weeks. Thank you and thank you.